All right, we're back for another EPL season. We've got a little friend here who's spectating today. Say hello, Carter. Carter's going to be making sure that I'm on point today, saying everything I need to say and doing everything we need to do and cover off in this episode. We've obviously got a lot going on. We haven't had an episode for a few weeks. Now, I've gone and had myself a new Liverpool supporter, a little baby girl. So we're really excited about that, to bring another Liverpool supporter into the world. But also, we've got my friend and co-host, Mr. T. He's been jet-setting around Europe, enjoying himself for the last 5 weeks. So he'll be back on next week's episode. But until then, we've got a lot to cover off. We've obviously got game week number 1. We've got a lot of transfers to cover off, but then we've also got the FA Community Shield, which is playing tonight. It's Liverpool versus Crystal Palace. So we'll dive into that in a little bit, but I kind of wanted to jump into a bit of the transfer centre at the first, because Liverpool's had a huge transfer window this window, the biggest in the history of the club, bringing in some of the top talent in the world. We obviously had Florian Wirtz coming in, we had Jeremy Frimpong, we've got Milos Kerkez, Hugo Ekitike, and it doesn't sound like we'll be stopping. We've obviously had a lot of players leave, with Darwin Núñez, Jarell Quansah, Luis Diaz, and obviously the biggest saga of last season was Trent Alexander-Arnold leaving. But I see only advantage with this Liverpool team coming up under Arne Slot this season. It's going to be crazy, because not only have we brought in Florian Wirtz, who is probably one of the best young talents, and sitting into that number 7 role, which we haven't had for some time. I know Luis Diaz tried his best to fill that role, but he never quite got to the levels that we need in that position. And now we're really kind of excited to see how this team's going to shape up. Obviously, the game tonight against Crystal Palace is going to be insane. We've had some tight results with them last year, and we're going to dive into it in a little bit more detail. But we've got a lot of hope for the season. So that being said, we've had a lot of other teams strengthen their positions this year, right? Man City, they've always been in the transfer market, and they're always going to be in the transfer market. But we've seen them bring in Alt Nuri, who had a fantastic season with Wolves last year. Ryan Cherky, who's another young talent that, under the age of 23, has the ability to play like he's a senior player at 26, 27. Then we've got Tijani Rendiz. This guy coming out of the Italian league is superb. He's almost like a Ryan Gravenberch. He's got a little bit more of an attacking talent, but he can turn on the ball. He plays balls out, and he's kind of a fantastic midfielder to add in there. Obviously, with Rodri coming back, he's a bit of a question mark at the moment. He's had a tough preseason. But that being said, they've still got a stacked team that's going to be hard to beat with the likes of Haaland up front. They've obviously lost KDB, who's gone to Napoli, which is a fantastic transfer for him. Kyle Walker has transferred out finally and gone to Burnley, which I think is a credit to go to Burnley, right? He's a senior player, and I think he's going to do very well there. The other teams that we want to kind of touch on, and I think I'm going to go into more detail when my partner T's back, because there's obviously a lot of transfers that have gone on between every team. There's a couple of sagas and a few different kind of gossips that I think we can dive into, but for the most part, we want to just kind of touch on some of the big ones and some of the transfers I think in week 1 that we're going to see some performances out of. Man United is obviously a team that everyone's watching at the moment, okay? Because their season last year was fairly dismal. I think they underperformed for the team that they had, but they have a lot of problems that they needed to get rid of. And I think they've done that by kind of removing some of the players and just releasing them, to be honest. So the players obviously they've brought in, which are going to be exciting, all in attack. You've got Mateus Cunha, who's come from Wolves, who had a fantastic season, a few disciplinary issues last year, but all round a really good goal scorer. And also very good on the link-up play when it comes to upfront movement. He's one of the better players in the league in that instance. Then we've got Ryan Mbeumo, who's obviously had a fantastic season last year with Brentford. Obviously, him and Wissa were able to connect so well. And, look, I think we can get into what Brentford's going to be able to do this season. I don't think it's going to be great. And then, look, the final piece of the puzzle for Man United was stealing Benjamin Šeško off Newcastle. We'll dive into what Newcastle's done this year, but Benjamin Šeško is obviously a young talent who's tapped up to go to one of the biggest clubs. Ended up at Man U, so he's not going to be playing Champions League, but They're clearly paying him the money he wants. Okay, so he's made that transfer in the last few days, and I think he'll be a good piece of that puzzle. And I'm interested to see how he gets utilised because he's a strong player. Look, his numbers last season weren't fantastic. He's not a 20-goal-a-year striker, but he's a striker who can definitely complement people's attacks. Then, look, Man United obviously needed to get rid of quite a few players. So they had Eriksen, Evans, and Lindelof all released, right? No transfers out, just released of their contracts, which probably makes sense. I mean, look, they're players that have been sitting around not doing much for the club. But at the same time, look, I still think Eriksen had some value in that squad. The other one, big one, was Rashford loaned out to Barca. I'm interested in going to follow how Rashford goes this year at Barca because I think he's a quality player that can definitely contribute to the Barcelona team. He's good on the ball. He's quick. He's definitely athletic and agile. But can he translate into a bit of a tiki-taka style of football? Can he knock the ball around? Can he make the runs off the players he needs to make the runs off? It's going to be a tough season for him, but I think if he can adapt and he probably takes out a bit of the ridiculous behind-the-scenes issues that he's had at every club, I tout him to be a fantastic player. So, look, I think Man U are going to have an interesting season. Then we kind of jump into Newcastle. Now, they've had a bit of a saga this year. They've brought in Anthony Elanga, which I think is going to be a great signing for them. Him, Jacob Murphy, I think can really link up well. But then we fall to, obviously, their main man, Ishak. Now, what's going to happen with Ishak? We don't know. He doesn't want to be at the club. He wants to come to Liverpool. He's voiced that opinion. He won't accept offers from any other clubs. And his mind is that he wants to lead the line for Liverpool. Obviously, Liverpool have made moves in their attacking outlet. And obviously, if we take Ishak, I fail to see how anyone's going to be able to stop us in the season because that attack with Mohamed Salah, Gakpo, and Ishak up front is an unbelievable front three. And I think that really rivals the days of Firmino, Salah and Mane because I think we've got the speed, we've got the skill, and we've got the finishing up front. So I'm highly interested to see what we can do with Ishak up front if we're able to get him. It's not looking strong possibilities at the moment. It's only more that the player is trying to push it through. So we will see. We've got a few weeks left to the transfer window, but Newcastle's had a tough time, right? They've tried to find replacement after replacement for Ishak. Benjamin Sesko has said no. Gyökeres has also declined and moved to Arsenal, which we'll get into. Then they've now fallen to go for Nicholas Jackson from Chelsea, which Nicholas Jackson's a decent striker, but he's no Ishak. He's not a replacement for Ishak. I mean, he's not even half an Ishak, to be honest. But he's a player that, obviously, if you need a striker and you've got the money, Chelsea are a selling club now, and they're a club that's going to ask for a lot of money because he's their main guy. And they've obviously got replacements. They've got 8 different replacements for every position. But we're going to really, really see what Newcastle can do and see if they can find the player they want. Then we'll move on to Arsenal. Now, this is obviously the funny one, right? Arsenal have been touted for season after season. If they get their striker, they get the win. And I think we've seen it, that they've finished second in the last 3 seasons. And if they had a striker, the argument is they would have won. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but they've got their man. So they've had a big transfer window, Arsenal. They've brought in Kepa, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, but he brought in Kepa from Chelsea for $5 million. Great deal. They've brought in Zubimendi, which was obviously a player Liverpool were going for at a time. He said no and turned it down. I think that was a bad decision from him, but we managed to put Ryan Gravenberch in there. We got the same result, if not better. They've brought in Norgard, who had a great season last year, but again, he's come from Brentford. What's his translation going to be in a team that's now playing Champions League? They've brought in Madueke, which is a confusing one. He had 7 goals last year, and they've paid $50 million for him. I don't know what the kind of play is there. He obviously likes to play on the right. I think the idea is that they can shift him to the left. So that's what I'm assuming they're going to do. They've brought in Mosquera, who's obviously a young centre-back, touted to be quite talented and could be a great possibility within their lineup. I'm interested to see how this guy's going to go because Mosquera look, he's strong. He can win. He can win a duel, and he can definitely win an aerial battle, which is very, very difficult for a young player to do in the Premier League. So it'd be interested to see. There won't be much pressure on him. He will be allowed to kind of work his way into the team, subject to injuries, of course, which has obviously been Arsenal's problems throughout the seasons. And then their main man, Gyökeres. They've finally got their striker. He's a guy that they've touted for 2 seasons to come. They want to bring him in. I speak to my Arsenal fan friends, and they're all touting him to do 20 goals in a season, which would be quite unheard of in a first year. We're talking Van Persie levels. I don't know if he's going to do it. I can say he might be a great fantasy investment if he's going to get 20 goals, because at 9 million, he's definitely one of the stronger players out there. Now, where I think Arsenal really fell out of this window is that they didn't capitalise on his sales. I don't think they had anyone to sell. So they released Jorginho, they released Tierney, they released Tomiyasu, and they had two end of loan periods for Neto and Sterling. So they've not capitalised on really selling any of their players and maximising what they can do in the window. And I think once we kind of break down where some of these teams ended up in within their finances for this window, we'll be pretty surprised, because whilst Liverpool have paid a fortune this window, we've made some great sales, meaning our net spend is in a good position. I mean, before we jump into that, though, I do want to touch on Chelsea, and we'll go into more detail with these players when my partner T is back. But, they've brought in Dario Isugo, who's tipped to be a very good young talent. Liam Delap, who had a fantastic season last year. Mamadou Sarr. Look, again, I'm not too familiar with Sarr, but we'll get a good detail from my co-host when he's back. We've got Jamie Gittins, who's, again, a fantastic young talent out of BVB. Jarell Hatto, who, again, is a fantastic talent coming out of the Dutch league. And then we've got Estavo. So they've brought on very good young talented players. At the same time, capitalising on a few sales of Dewsbury Hall, Leslie Ugo Chukwu, Armando Broja, João Felix went, and Petrovic, their goalkeeper, has all moved on to other clubs. Now, let's just break down where the net spend ended up after this transfer window, because this is where it gets interesting. Now, obviously, we look at Liverpool, £291 million in this window. It's the biggest window in the history of the club. They've spent a record fee on Florian Wirtz to come into the club, and they've kind of had, in my opinion, my biased opinion, the best transfer that I've ever seen, with some of the players coming in. I think the only other that rivals this was the coming of Van Dijk and Alisson. But if we look at the net spend, Arsenal end up being top of the league for the most money spent in this window. They've spent £195.5 million. They've only received £9 million back in sales, having a net spend of £186.5 million, which obviously, when you look at us paying almost £100 million more than them this window, and having a net spend of 170 million, it's crazy, right? Whilst we spent 291 million, we had 121 million worth of transfers out, meaning we've taken players that probably weren't up to the caliber of our team and replaced them with quality. I just don't think Arsenal has done that to capitalise like the other teams have. Man United, whilst, no Champions League football, have managed to spend 136.8 million. They've had $0 in sales out, meaning their net spend is 136.8. Chelsea, who rival us with the transfer spend this season at 236.1 million, has had almost as much money received at 111.2 million. So when we start seeing some of these numbers, it gets astronomical. The one to really, really call out, and we'll break it down in more detail, was Sunderland. So they've just been promoted this season. They've come into the league, and we've seen this done before. They've come in, they've spent 127.6 million. They've had a net spend of 90.6 million, which is huge. And we know we all followed the Sunderland Till We Die documentary series, in which we documented them coming down from the Premier League all the way through down to League One, and now they've resurged and come back, which is fantastic for them, and I'm happy for the supporters because they've got a strong supporting club that deserves to be in the Premier League. But we've seen it time and time again, teams coming up from the Championship, spending big money on players to try and compete with some of these clubs. And just unfortunately, it hasn't come to fruition for them to be able to compete. It's a hard league, and I don't know if that's going to come to their aid. Now, obviously, there's a few weeks left of the window. However, there's a couple of teams that I think will struggle with them not picking up players. The likes of Brentford is one of them, and Wolves being the other. Right? They've spent a lot. They've let players go. Now, to give perspective, Brentford have spent 42 million, but they've let go of 88.4. So they've actually profited off this window, and it's the same for Wolves. So Wolves have profited 26.5 million off this window, 67 million of money spent. A lot of players that don't have strong names in the international football, however, may translate into the Premier League. We've seen it done before. But as we saw last year, it took some real heroic play in the back half of the season. Now, let's jump into some actual football. So, obviously, we've got the FA Community Shield on tonight. It's going to be Liverpool versus Crystal Palace. It's going to be a wild game. Now, last season, we had two games against Palace. We had a 1-1 draw at the end of the season, and then we had a 1-0 win. Now, they're not strong results. Obviously, we've improved our team considerably. Palace themselves have not brought in very many players whatsoever, with a $3 million spend and $0 worth of sales. So you've got the likes of, Matete and Eze that are going to be playing really hard in this game. They want to be able to get on the ball as much as possible, and it depends how our midfield's going to be able to shut that down. Obviously, look, my predicted starting 11 for this game is obviously Alisson in goals. He's back and healthy. If he's unable to play, he has had some family issues, we will have Mamardashvili, who will come in. Again, fantastic player, Georgian goalkeeper, who had a great tournament with Georgia, but let's just see how he goes. He's had a good preseason, a few good saves that we've seen in there. Then for our defensive line, we're going to have the likes of Frimpong, who had a fantastic preseason. He's killing it. He's so quick. He's able to get a pass in the box. He's able to beat a player. We're then going to have Kanate and Van Dijk holding it down as the two centre-back positions. Both those guys obviously have worked together for a number of seasons now. They know what each other wants. They know how each other plays. And they're obviously one of the best pairings in the Premier League. I'd argue the best. And then we're going to have over at left back. Now, this is where it's going to be a bit controversial because we've obviously brought in Milos Kerkez from Bournemouth, who's obviously a very, very strong left back, has probably the best left back in the league for last season. However, we've still got Robbo, right? And Robbo himself is an experienced player, especially in a final like this, in a cup game where we can win some silverware early in the season. He's very capable to do the job. So I'll be interested to see what kind of combination of players they're going to go for. Then for our midfield, this is going to be a contested one. I think we've got a lot of competition in the midfield this year. So Gravenberch will start in that number 6 role. I think McAllister will play in front of him with Wirtz. But there's an argument for Dominic Szoboszlai to play, right? He's probably one of our best midfielders in preseason this year. He was getting on the ball, scoring goals, and actually have been quite useful in the transitions going forward. He was one of the goals that he have been scoring aren't your traditional tapping goals. They're not coming off plays. They are coming from, his action directly from laying off balls within the midfielders and the attackers. So I'm pretty confident that he can get the job done, and he could be starting over McAllister because McAllister has had a bit of a slower preseason, just given he's had a couple of knocks that he needed to get through, and he's now come back, and obviously he's going to be a big supporter of the team throughout the season. However, he's now interchangeable. He doesn't have to play as many minutes. Then in attack, we're going to go with our front three of Salah, Hugo Ekitike, and Gakpo. Now, Ekitike hasn't had many minutes with Liverpool at this stage, but from what we've seen, he's pretty agile on the ball. He's very tall, so he can definitely win a header. And it's whether or not he's going to be able to gel with the other two and Florian Wirtz coming through the midfield, because as we've seen, Florian's just a massive talent who's going to be able to lay the ball off, get open, and obviously plays well already with Salah. Just given they love to give each other assists, and they're not just pure goal scorers like some say. So, look, I'm open to see what the game happens tonight, and I'm going to say, for my prediction on the game, I'm thinking a Liverpool 3-1 win. So, excited to see what it is, and we'll obviously give an analysis of that game in the next episode. But why don't we jump into match day 1? I'll have a look. I'll give you some of my predictions on what's going to happen. And then I'll give you some predictions of what I think is going to happen for the season. So, match day 1, we've got a lot of kind of matchups that I'm very interested to see how a lot of these teams are going to play off each other. I think some of them have had a bit of a rocky kind of entering into the season. So, first game, we've got Liverpool versus Bournemouth. Obviously, I think it's going to be a Liverpool win. Bournemouth have lost a few players, and I don't think that they've capitalised by bringing in some big names. Then we've got Aston Villa and Newcastle. I've gone Aston Villa in this one. Now, look, I think the issue with Newcastle was they're a very strong team, and I think they're ready to perform. The issue we're going to run into is that Ishak is still causing a lot of stir, and they're not quite sure who's going to be leading their front line for this season. And obviously entering the season, and it's already touted that Ishak will not play in the opening game of the season. So I think Aston Villa probably has the strongest side when it comes to their chemistry at the moment. We've then got the Brighton and Fulham game. Now, look, I think Brighton's always going to be a strong team. Fulham, again, like we always said last season, they play the football that comes in front of them, and then they end up emulating and trying to battle the team in their style of football. I think Brighton's a lot stronger, but being the first game of the season, I think a shock result. I think it's going to be a draw. We've got Sunderland versus West Ham. Now, Sunderland's a new team up. West Ham's not touched too much. They've got their main players in there. I'm going for a West Ham win, even though it's away from home. Tottenham versus Burnley. Look, Tottenham's recruited really well. Okay, they've brought in Mohamed Kudus in their wide-sitting midfielder. He's capable of scoring. He's very dangerous in attack. Obviously, they're losing Son. That's massive for the club. However, I think Kudus can pick up the goals that he would contribute to normally. Obviously, a new manager as well, Thomas Frank, coming in. So, interested to see how they do. But look, they've got a good first game picking up Burnley. Whilst Burnley, strong team, they're not quite to the Premier League standard. Then we've got Wolves and City. Like I said just before this, Wolves, they haven't recruited well. I think they've lost their main guy in Cunha, and Alt Nuri probably being their better of the assist providers within their team. I think we're going to see City have riot. I think there's going to be a few goals in this game. We've got Chelsea versus Palace. Look, Chelsea's recruited really well. It's how that team gels with each other. But I think Cole Palmer's going to really step up at the start of the season like we did see him last season. So I've gone Chelsea with the win on this. Then we've got Forest versus Brentford. Look, Forest, Brentford, both teams have probably been pretty weak in the transfer market. There was a whole saga around Gibbs White. He was obviously touted to go to Newcastle. That never went through. There's some legal action going on, but I think we'll break it down in more detail next week when I've got my co-host here. We've got Man U and Arsenal, I'm loving this for the opening game. I'll say this will be the game of the round. I'm interested to see what Man U can do with their new players. See, they've got a new front three, realistically. They've not recruited in defence, which I think is going to hurt them this season. And Arsenal, they've got the striker now. So they've got no excuse. It's got to be hit the ground running. He's got to start scoring. And I think Arsenal are going to take this win. Then the final game of the round, Leeds versus Everton. I've got a draw in this one, and it's a hard one to pick, right? You don't know how Everton's going to come out and play. And you don't know how Leeds are going to come out to play. Leeds sacked their coach coming into this season to bring in a kind of a more experienced coach that knows how to do the Premier League. And I'm interested to see how it goes. They've obviously got some strong players. They're very strong in the Championship last year. But again, Everton are just a dog of a team. And you don't want to verse Everton, especially in the first game of the season, because, again, with Moisey there, he definitely likes to play a long ball. They've got Beto up front who can bring it down. So they're my predictions for match day 1. But what are my predictions for the season? I think that's where we've got to really, really look into, because this season is going to be an interesting one,
right? I don't know if it's going to be as straightforward as some think. I think there's going to be a lot of surprise teams outplaying some of the others, but I think I've gone fairly conservative for this, at least for the start of the season. I may change my perspective on what's going to occur. I think the winners of this season will be Liverpool again. In the top four, with obviously Liverpool first, in any order, I'm seeing Man City, Arsenal, and Chelsea coming in the top four. I think they've recruited the best and they've brought in the most talent. Now, whether there's a surprise in there, we never know with injuries, but those kind of four teams have definitely recruited the best, and they've been the most consistent teams over the last few seasons. Then in the relegation battle now, obviously the usual process is the teams that come up, go down, and it's a bit of a yo-yo situation. However, I am going in a different direction. I do think Burnley will go down. I don't think they've recruited well enough. I don't think that the club kind of is big enough to remain in the Premier League. Right? I'm sure Burnley fans will fucking hate me for that, but sucks to be you. Then we've got, relegation-wise, and I think I've said this multiple times already, Wolves and Brentford, I don't think have recruited well enough for the players they've lost, and I think they're going to struggle. I think Brentford losing their manager, I think Brentford losing in Mbeumo, I think Brentford not recruiting in those positions, and then obviously touted that Wissa may be going as well. It's going to make life hard for Brentford. And then Wolves, who I tipped last season to get relegated, but I'm always doubled down on that decision because they've lost players and they've not recruited. And I think, like we saw in the start of last season, they struggle to pick up results because they don't have those players that are going to really try and drive them to success. So unless some of these players that, to be fair, I haven't researched well enough to understand if they're going to assist that team, that's where my kind of heart lies with it. And, I think out of that, this year, within this season, this podcast anyway, we're going to focus a lot more on the Fantasy Premier League. Okay, we've started up our own league, which, go to our Instagram. We've got the code up there. We want as many people to join in as possible. I think, hopefully we can get 15 or 20 people and really talk through what is going on this year with the Premier League, because there's a whole bunch of new rule changes with the Fantasy Premier League this year. The FPL rules for 25-26 focus on rewarding defensive contributions, which means I think previously everyone's defenders were essentially fullbacks, right? Like they had fullbacks because they were providing assists and the occasional goal. Whereas now it's almost like putting in some centre backs that get good clean sheets. It might be worthwhile getting them because right now defenders earn points for defensive actions this season. So we're going to see clearances, blocks, interceptions, and tackles all counted towards the defensive points that are earned. You're going to have midfielders and forwards also get points for ball recoveries. Managers now have 2 sets of chips. So not only are you going to get the additional points, we're now doubling down on the sets of chips. So your wild card, your free hits, your triple captain, and your bench boost all get to be used twice within a season. So look, it's going to take a bit of strategy this year about when is best to use some of these chips, because you're going to get them in the first 19 games, in the back half as well. So defensive contributions, let's dive into the defensive contributions a little bit deeper. So defenders earn 2 points for every 10 combined clearances, blocks, interceptions, tackles that they make in a match, with a maximum of 2 points per match from this metric. Meaning you can now concede a goal, but do so well that you can still gain 4 points. But imagine that, the additional 2 points with a clean sheet. That's fantastic. So midfielders and forwards earn 2 points for every 12 combined clearances, blocks, interceptions, tackles, and ball recoveries. The likes of Salcedo are going to be important now, because those 2 extra points, if they're getting them game in, game out, can be great point additions to your team. So ball recoveries. So this will include regaining possession of the ball, starting a counterattack, or securing possession after a contested ball. So again, players like Gravenberch is going to be very handy in this situation. Rodri would be excellent if he starts the season. And then you've obviously got the 2 sets of chips, like we just mentioned, right? So every manager of their fantasy team now will have a full set of chips: wild card, free hit, triple captain, and bench boost. for the first half of the season, and then again for the second half. So you'll be able to use your chips from the first round all the way through to 19, and then have a second set that'll be available from game week 20. So look, this is going to take a little bit more kind of strategic approach to when you use these, because a lot of people obviously love to save the chips until the end of the season. But I think now there's going to be some strategic maneuvers of when these get used, because, the likes of bench boost doesn't really become effective until about halfway through the season, once you can kind of build up a bit of an asset within your team, increase the prices of some players, and really hope to kind of gain momentum throughout the season. So there'll be a change to the assist rule this year. So meaning that a forced handball is no longer required for a player to be awarded an assist if a penalty free kick is awarded from a handball they forced. Meaning if the player goes to tackling, makes a handball, that results to a penalty off a shot, they will now get an assist, which is great, because you get the likes of Alexis McAllister. He's great for that. Cole Palmer's another one. Where he takes a shot, handball comes off him. He doesn't get the assist. However, he's the one who's generated the penalty. So, yeah, look, there's a lot of good changes this year, and I think it's going to be kind of one to follow. And obviously, we're going to be following along in our league. So anyone that's in our league, we want you to kind of join up, subscribe, do whatever you need to do, because you can kind of follow along, one, what the pundits are going to be doing, myself and T when he's back. But two, we're going to break down the season. We're going to watch what everyone does. I know I've got a few sneaky players in there, Akash being one of them. He loves kind of touting how good he was. Beat me by almost 100 points last season. So we're going to make sure that he can't be doing that this season. We're going to take a strategic approach on how we achieve this. But as well, while we're doing that, we've also got to change to the bonus point system. So there's going to be a lot of changes here. Changes to the bonus point system mean that goalkeepers will now get 3 points for saves from shots inside the box. So goalkeeper points. Goalkeepers now earn 10 points for scoring a goal as well. So, I mean, very rare. I can't remember the last time a goalkeeper scored a goal, I should say. But, 10 points for a goal, that's pretty fantastic, right? Look, I'm interested to see how this season goes, because there's been obviously a lot of players in. And join our league. Try your best against some of my stupid mates, T's stupid mates, and obviously some of our listeners. But yeah, look, we're pretty excited for it. We want to kind of see if you guys can beat us in what we tout ourselves to be professionals, whilst we sit on a couch and talk shit about some of these players, put our money where our mouth is and see what it is. We may generate some prizes throughout the season. We'll keep you posted on what that looks like, but we definitely want to kind of give the winner a little bit of a prize and a bit of a reward. So we're going to figure out what's the most appropriate once my co-host gets back from his goddamn European holiday. But what we kind of, before I love you and leave you with all of that, I just want to kind of let's go through where you should invest your coins. Like what looks like it's going to be a wise choice this year. And I think what everyone always brings up is Mohamed Salah. Is he worth the 14.5 million price tag they give him? Now, he's obviously been the most points, the highest point scoring player in FPL history, but as well for the last 5 seasons been the most points scoring. So he's obviously a player that gets goals, he gets assists. Obviously, Liverpool keep a lot of clean sheets, so he does. He does gain a lot of points, and it's whether or not he is worth the money to put into your team. For me, he's the first player I put into my team. And will he be able to replicate this season? Look, it's hard to say. He's obviously getting on in years. He's still a strong player. He had the best season of his career last year. Does that fall off? If it falls off by 10 or 15%, is he still the best player? And I say yes. Cole Palmer, that's another one that everyone should always look at. Look, he runs the Chelsea team at 10.5. He's another expensive player to bring in, but he gets goals, he gets assists, and again, he wins back the ball and he's transitional. So for me, he's worth it to be in my team. Here's another controversial one. Haaland. Is he going to be worth putting in the team? He's got no KDB to give him assists anymore. And at 14 million, he is the second highest the second most expensive player that you can put into your team. Now, can you fit Salah and Haaland into the team? There was an argument last season to have both of them. But at the same time, if one of those guys isn't achieving the numbers, you're in a bit of a deficit here. So, look, my issues here, you've got Mamouche and Cherki put into the team. How much of that workload is going to go to them rather than to Haaland? Are they going to be winning games 5-0, 6-0 like they have been? I don't know. They've got to come off the kind of terrible season they had last year and really try to knuckle down and figure something out. But at the same time, they're very, very strong team with obviously Pep still there. They're not going to be easy to beat. Now, I wanted to break down some of the new signings that have moved teams, which might be worth some kind of consideration for your team. So you're going to have Mohamed Kudus for Spurs. I think he's a fantastic choice for most people's teams. He's $6.5 million. He's on the cheaper side of things for a midfielder. But I think he'll be a starter at Spurs. I think he'll be very transitional. We've seen what Thomas Frank did with the likes of Wisser and Mbembo playing off each other. Very strong. He likes the athleticism. He likes them running at the back line. He likes what he can get out of a player like Kudus. We've got Florian Wirtz, right? $8.5 million on the expensive side for a new player to the Premier League. But that being said, he is probably one of the best young talents that you're going to see come through the Premier League in a long time, since KDB coming to Manchester City. That's how I see this player coming in. Then we've got Frimpong and Kirkes, both at $6 million, both very, very strong. Both very, very strong fullbacks. It's undeniable. They are going to get assists and they are going to challenge a lot of the backline players. They almost play like wingers. And obviously, look, the concern you're going to get is that they do like getting forward. And will that mean that we'll be exposed in the back? Potentially. But I think we will outscore them. And I think they will generate a lot of assists. I see this being like a young TAA and Robbo when Klopp took over. I see them being possibly better than those two. Then we've got Cherki for Manchester City. At $6.5 million, I think he's a bit of a steal. If he's going to start every game, he could definitely generate double-digit goals, double-digit assists in his first season. He could. And he's done it. He had similar numbers to Florian Wirtz at Bayer Leverkusen that he did at Lyon. Now, we are talking Lyon, of course. We're talking about the French league, and we have seen players come out of the French league and completely flop. Shamak is one that always rings off everyone's lips. The other one, look at Alt-Nuri, right? Alt-Nuri has just come into Manchester City's team. He has shown that he can get an assist. He's shown that he can really run off the ball and link up with players. So him at $6 million, it's a little bit on the expensive side, but there's a reason for that. The other two that I want to touch on, well, three realistically, is Mbembo, Cunha, and Šeško. Now, I think you have a choice with Šeško, right? Šeško is either going to be your guy or you're going to have Gyökeres. I don't know if you can fit both into the team. I'd like to see someone try to. But the other ones you got to consider is Mbembo and Cunha at 8, right? $8 million for Mbembo and Cunha. They're both proven they can score. But Mbembo definitely come back on the larger side for preseason training. So it depends how much he knuckles down and gets rid of that. But again, all very good options. For me, if I was going to look at this, I would always go for Kudus, Wirtz, Frimpong. I think those three are probably the strongest of the new signings, especially at their price. But we shall see how it unfolds in the first game being tonight with Wirtz and especially Frimpong. But look, a few cheap options. We always need a cheap option. But I think there's probably two that we can probably look at. Look, Esteve from Burnley, right? He's obviously their starting defender. He's going to have a lot of work to do. Those 2 bonus points for clearances and the likes at $4 million might be worth it. And then the other one I would tout is Heaven. So he's obviously the new player, got signed from Arsenal, went across to Man U in the last transfer window. Look, if he starts every game, he could definitely be an option, him or Dorgu. But again, they're good cheap options. And look, final note before we kind of leave you to the rest of the season and the game tonight is Gyökeres. Where does everyone think he's going to sit? Do we think he's going to do 20 goals a season like, the Arsenal fans are touting? He's obviously scored his first goal in pre-season. it was off a header, and it was a lovely run. But same time, can he keep up with the pace? Look, here's an interesting fact. Obviously, all the goals that he managed to score in the Portuguese league, all those goals came for teams that were in the bottom half. He only managed 2 goals out of the odd 40-odd that he got over the teams in the top half. So, can he score against the big dogs? Arsenal fans will tell me, we only need him to score against the little guys. We don't need him to score against the big guys. I think once he starts missing a few goals, everyone loves to have a laugh at Darwin Núñez. But remember, he was the top goal scorer in the Portuguese league when he came. So I think we're interested to see how it goes. We'll in usual fashion, upload our teams onto Instagram before the season starts. But all the best. Join the league, and let's see who can be the best tipster there is. This season, we'll obviously be running a tipping comp too. I think we're going to keep that one more private between myself and my co-host here, just to track where we're at. But look, join in if you want. We're happy to kind of take suggestions and see how it goes. But, until next week, guys, we'll talk to you.